Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay. Welcome to episode 157. I'm speaking with the best-selling author Chris Bailey on his new book, Hyperfocus: How to Be More Productive in a World of Distraction. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
Okay, just quickly, one of the biggest problems that we face as artists is figuring out how much we're worth. Typically, the situation is that we go into job interviews and we're asked how much we're going to charge. We either shoot ourselves in the foot by saying that we charge less than we're worth, so that way we get the gig, and indirectly end up leaving tens of thousands of dollars accumulatively over time on the table, rather than actually asking what we should be charging. At the same time, you don't want to alienate your employers by asking for too much and leaving yourself out in the cold. So what I've done is I put together a website, check it out, www.vfxrates.com, and this is a chance for you to be able to put in your experience, your discipline, the location you're working, all the good things that will give you a fairly accurate idea of what you and everyone else should be charging in your discipline. This is something that I'm going to continue to build and flesh out over time, but the key thing is actually that I don't want to just showcase how much you should be worth, but also show you and hand you the tools to grow beyond that and to learn to negotiate better, to learn to ask for the right amount of money in the right way. There's lots of additional tools and information I want to hand over to you. Everything's free. Check it out, vfxrates.com. Put in your information and you'll instantly get notified of how much money you should be charging per hour as a VFX artist. vfxrates.com. All right, welcome to a brand new episode. So I'm really excited for this one. I love to talk productivity because I love to get more done and to be more efficient with my time and make more time to get more done. So productivity for me is definitely close to the heart. In the past, I've done episodes on this podcast with the New York Times bestselling author David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, as well as the TED speaker Laura Vanderkam on some of her books as well. And this episode is going to be with Chris Bailey, who's written a lot of books in the past. This one, Hyperfocus, is going to be a game changer. I'm really excited for this one. I'm really excited to get into some of the mindsets that we share. I will admit that we're kind of goofy in the beginning. Chris is just a fun guy, so we kind of mess around a little bit and have a lot of jokes, but at the same time, hopefully that just keeps the energy high and as we get into a lot of really cool stuff. So in addition to this, I have a productivity guide that you can download for free at allanmckay.com/productive, and you'll be able to get access to that. I definitely think it would be a great companion to Hyperfocus, but for me, I really want to push this book. I think that it's a really great read and there's a lot of really amazing insights. The thing about Chris is he's done a lot of experimentation and loves to really kind of push the envelope with a lot of the dilemmas that we run into and kind of really dive deep into them. So I think that there's so much really valuable stuff from this book, as well as from his website, his blogs, and everything else as well. If you want to check out the show notes, go to allanmckay.com/157, and I'll leave links to where you can get his book. His audiobook is also available as well on Audible, and also to his blog and everything else too, as well as everything else that we mentioned in this episode. So go to allanmckay.com/157, and like I said, I'll link to the productivity guide there. As I want to mention before we get into this episode is if you haven't gotten the Ultimate Demo Reel Guide, you can still get it right now if you go to allanmckay.com/myreel. And that goes through a lot of really great insights into building an effective demo reel, advice from myself and others who do the hiring, rather than typically a lot of the advice that's given from artists who are a little bit oblivious maybe to what happens after their reel gets received. So this is definitely right on the money. A lot of really great insights there, as well as access to a 2-hour free masterclass, which will be available when you sign up too, and a lot of additional videos that I share. So it's a gold mine of information. I recommend you go to allanmckay.com/myreel right now, and then let's get in this episode. So I want to get right into this without further ado. Chris Bailey, the author of Hyperfocus. Let's dive in. Chris, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
So I'm Chris, as you probably just heard from Allan McKay. I'm the author.
Oh, what did you know?
Hey, bud. I heard your wife was from Newfoundland, bud. Don't you know about... Sorry, we're off to a great start here, man. People have already tuned out. People they say, I don't have time for this shit. I've got deadlines.
This obviously isn't coffee I'm drinking. It's something
It's
else.
like 7:30 in the morning in LA right now, isn't it?
That's right.
God bless you.
So yeah,
God bless you for doing this. If you fell asleep, I'm not able to prod you with a stick.
I will say that this morning I'm like boiling coffee and I started stocking the fridge with beer because I do have a beer meeting at 4:00 with some people in Ohio and some other places. So like I'm like, all right, priorities: coffee and beer for later. Okay,
now,
good.
Now I have to ask: Friday. Is this a daily meeting at 4 p.m. where you drink beer, or is this once a week?
Twice a day? No. No, it's actually we're talking about like John Lee Dumas and Pat Flynn's like a mutual friend of ours. He's over in Ohio, and it's like occasionally we'll do like a Skype and just kind of shoot the shit, kind of like a mastermind without the mastermind bit, just the beer and catching up on everything.
Just minds, not masterminds.
Exactly. But sorry,
I have to
Chris.
Introduce myself. So I'm Chris. I'm a big nerd about productivity. I've written a couple of books about productivity through Penguin Random House. They're out in 20 some languages, I think now. I'm just a big nerd. I love experimenting with productivity. That's my thing. A lot of people give advice on how to become more productive, but they don't actually take the advice themselves. We were talking a bit about this before. And so I'm a big fan of actually experimenting with this stuff and trying to put it into practice. So I've done some things like I've lived in total isolation for 10 days to see the impact that being around people have on our productivity. For this next book, I lived in boredom for a total month, making myself purposely bored for an hour a day. I used my smartphone for just an hour a day for 3 months, all to get to the bottom of what is it that makes us tick and how can we push on the limits of how much we get done every day. There's some there's some things we can do in order to work a bit smarter and get out in front of our impulses. So I want to figure those things out. It's like we were chatting before the pod started, was there's some people who say they're going to do stuff and don't do stuff. And then there are people who say they're going to do stuff and they get that stuff done. And so what is it that separates these groups of people? And I think that difference is productivity.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that. And there's so many things I want to ask you about with what you just mentioned.
This could be like a 5-hour podcast. We could do like...
Dude, like you need another bathroom break yet? So, no, honestly, I think this is really awesome. And again, like we're just chatting a little bit before about like I do think that artists in general, not artists in general, but I'll say everyone in general, there's definitely a bit of resistance where anything to do with like internalizing, such as like, okay, I got to work on myself in whatever way, there's always going to be that resistance because it's easier to look externally for the solution. Yeah. So that's why I think that a lot of people are going to be like, all right, I got to find, a better calendar method or whatever it is, rather than like, okay, well, if you just don't check your freaking phone until 10 in the morning, you're probably going to have like that, a mini isolation moment for yourself. But do you find like a lot of people do have that resistance to, thinking, I guess working smarter rather than harder?
Yeah, totally. And this is the thing about productivity is for every minute you spend reading about productivity or listening to guys like us talk about productivity, you have to make that time back and then some, or else you're essentially just consuming productivity porn, which there's a lot of out there. There's a lot of, here's how I manage my daily schedule, and here's why I drink a cup of matcha tea first thing in the morning before I meditate, and things like that. But at a certain point, you just have to do the goddamn work and get out of your own way. And all the productivity advice in the world won't help you if you don't want to do the work and you don't want to work hard. So I kind of see it as two sides of the same coin. On one side, there's doing the work and putting in the energy and working hard. And on the other side, there's working more strategically and working smarter. And so there's a lot of people who say, oh, working smart is such a great substitute for working hard. But in practice, I don't really think it works that way. It works to a certain level, but then you got to do the work.
Yep, no, absolutely. I think that you hit on the head. Like you want to be
Yeah.
a doer. Sorry, I was just segueing about something that kind of popped in my head, which I'm procrastinating about whether to mention. But I'm thinking of like half the shit we've already talked about. Like I had this realization the other day, literally just the other day. Like there's this stupid saying that when I was 13 years old, one of my friends and I used to say, because we're 13 and stupid little kids, but it was from The Cable Guy, I think, where Jim Carrey was saying something like, "He who procrastinates masturbates," and it was all about, that was meant to be the metaphor for, you either go after the girl or you're going to be at home by yourself with, a box of Kleenex or something. So
That's great.
the dumbest 13-year-old boy thing to say, but like we say it like as a joke because it was really funny. But oddly, like a couple of days ago, I actually thought about that again. I was like, you know what, like there's actually some like really great advice in there in terms of procrastination is masturbation, in terms of, and this is where the direction of the podcast is going, like 5 minutes in.
Well, I think you need some great productivity tactics to kind of lubricate this, this social intercourse between a conversation like between two men like us. And so I think it's important to.
There you go.
Yeah, this is the end of my career as a productivity
rock
expert.
bottom.
This is it.
So in a way that I do think that like there is some good advice. Jeez, but I think there is some good points in there though about like that you can kind of look at everything like, okay, I'm gonna do all these shiny little things that are gonna make me better at what I'm doing, but at some point you've got to just stop procrastinating, because sometimes, as you mentioned, like productivity porn, which somehow falls perfectly into this whole metaphor, that is something that like you're essentially procrastinating by going and doing all this. And it's kind of like studying 1,000 subjects instead of getting out there in the real world and doing it. All of this comes down to like, do you want to be an executor, or do you want to be someone who's more like in love with the idea of hey, I'm gonna eventually go and do these things. It's kind of like saying I'm gonna write my own book. Obviously you're a doer because you wrote some fucking books, but other people they're more in love with the idea of it, but actually doing it, that's like, fuck, that's a lot of work. It's way more comforting to just continue to kind of not practice it, but mentally prepare myself to actually do it.
The curious thing, and I think while that's true, it's not totally our fault at the same time. So we do have to kind of get out of our own way. Well, one of the fascinating things is the second book that I wrote. It's all about attention management. So there's a lot of books on time management. In fact, there's probably too many books on time management out there, I would say, that prevent us, that get in our way. But there aren't really many books that are a more complete guide to how we can focus. And the thing about the way our focus is wired is we're wired to pay attention to anything that is one of three things by default. So the attentional system in our mind, the orienting system, it's wired to pay attention to anything that's 1, pleasurable, 2, threatening, or C, novel. And we even have a novelty bias embedded within our mind's prefrontal cortex, the logical center of our mind, whenever we focus on something that's new and novel. So whenever we focus on something new and novel, our mind releases a hit of dopamine, which is one of the main pleasure chemicals of our brain and our body. And so we essentially get rewarded for focusing on something new and novel. And when it's pleasurable and threatening, we're drawn to it in the first place. And so if you look at the things that we pay attention to by default, you're just kind of letting your mind be, and you notice where it gravitates to. It'll gravitate to your phone, one of the most pleasurable, novel things in your environment. If you're flipping through the TV channels, it might gravitate to a novel, threatening thing like cable news. If you're, whatever you happen to be doing, this is the way our attention is. It's fascinating in this way. So I think, on one hand, we got to do the work. But this is, I think, where working smarter comes into play, is that because we're distracted so often, I think it's kind of important to realize that some of it's our fault. There's a point where we got to step up, but at the same time, there are these uphill battles that we have to transverse, and it's because of this wiring that exists in our mind.
Right, so you kind of set up the fail. So I think it's actually a good point in a way you're right, to be aware of that, to be aware that you actually do have all these kind of handicaps, if you want to look at it that way, put in place already. So you've already got that resistance that you got to fight through, rather than it being like, okay, I just got to start from scratch. It's more, I've got to actually work against some of the things that are make me want to go and sit down and watch the Kardashians instead of, not that I watch that.
You can tell us if you do.
But instead of going and working. If you look at my cable thing, it would actually show up quite a lot. But I swear it's
you
my
swear.
fiance.
Okay.
It's my wife. To kind of switch gears for a second, like I do think that I know you get this question a lot, but like, how did you kind of get onto the journey of productivity? Was it just something that kind of fascinated you about like where your time was going, or what kind of
honestly, it's the feeling of being productive. We have those days where we accomplish everything on our plate and then some. And then there are the days where we tread water. We bounce between distractions. Maybe we're not on a deadline. And so I think for, it's probably been about a decade at this point where I've just been chasing that feeling of being productive. And it first came when I read a book, and he's a friend of mine, probably a friend of yours, David Allen, the originator of the Getting Things Done methodology. That book, which has the premise of that our mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. And so much like making a shopping list where, you're not so stressed out when you're walking through the grocery store because you have to remember that you need to buy cantaloupe. You have a list for that. You get to externalize these things that you have to get done. And so you can walk through the grocery store stress-free. This feeling can be extrapolated across our entire lives when we realize that our mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. We get these into an external system, and then we have more attention to give to conversations and meaningful and productive things in the moment. And that feeling, I think that was when I first felt it. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was, that feeling is one I've been chasing, and like really, that it internalized when I was a bit younger. This idea that we only have so much time and only so much attention and so much energy. So are we going to waste it, or are we going to spend it on what's productive and meaningful? At the risk of sounding like one of those corny motivational posters, our time is limited. You're listening to this right now, and for every minute you spend on this podcast, that's 1 minute you won't get at the end of your life to do something else. And so there's that opportunity cost. And so how are we going to spend it? What are we going to do with our limited time? And I don't know, like I think some people have that idea internalized, and some people kind of go through an autopilot mode. But I've always been a big fan of that feeling and of knowing those limits.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really cool. And I think that's going to be a kind of recurring theme with our conversation here, that like I do feel that time is essentially a currency, and the same way that I think that the way that you're describing is that you have a bank, or a place that you can store so much information in your brain, that again, by having places to store everything, the less that you have to kind of occupy your brain and allow you to probably be more present in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, it's kind of fascinating. I totally forgot this until yesterday. I was reading this, proofing just like a guide to something that I'm putting out, and there was, I think it was about a year ago, I was looking up a different TED speaker talking about, I think, like time wasting or something like that, and I think he mentioned something about like a life clock, something like that. Either way, I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like Googling stuff, and eventually I discovered the death clock. And I didn't know that this was a thing, but you can actually like put in, your age and like a lot of like arbitrary kind of information, but it'll kind of estimate like when you're going to die. And but the really morbid thing is it actually will come up with like a chart of like a little bar representing every single day that you have left. And I don't know, like for me, it kind of like, it was great. It was so morbid, but it kind of really put in perspective of like, this is kind of literally a clock or a bunch of values, and every day one of these goes away. It's like, grains of sand or whatever in a timer. And Yeah, I just thought that was kind of really fascinating though to kind of look at it as data of like, yeah, like your time is literally these values and they're depleting one at a time until you get
Killed.
killed. So
Wow, I don't
yeah,
know
I
how
mean,
your life is good.
well,
Most people just kind of die. They don't get killed.
I think the analogy I wrote in the thing I was reading yesterday was like, it won't anticipate the self-driving Uber car that strikes
Yeah.
me at
Once
2057.
the Uber cars become
But yeah, I
sentient.
mean,
Yeah.
that's right, Skynet in a Prius. But that's just it though. I think that like kind of putting in perspective and however that is that people are going to make it resonate for them specifically, like you do have a certain amount of time that you can put, whether it is in your life or whether it is in your day or your week, and claim that back to spend elsewhere, kind of like money and everything else. I mean, I'd rather be spending my money on something fun than on bills. So how do I optimize my finances to get more money to go spend on beer or
Yeah,
whatever the
and
hell I need to?
you see a lot of people understand. I don't have kids in my life, so I speak with a lot of people who do. And the thing that comes up again and again and again is that when somebody has a family, the value of their time goes up because the opportunity cost of working another hour, of attending the after work party, of slacking off at work becomes much greater, because for every hour you spend poking around on Facebook or Twitter, that's an hour that you don't get to spend with your kids and see them grow up in front of you, and spend with your
Hmm.
wife and or husband. This is, I think, something we all have to internalize. We don't realize it, but and sometimes we need that reminder when we start a family, for example, when we're about to go on a trip. Is another good example. But there is that opportunity cost of our time. And something remarkable happens. Like if I told you, say it's Monday, Alan, and I said, man, like you just won the draw. Like you won an all expenses paid trip back home to Australia. You can come back, and but it leaves. Yeah, we'll let you back
You
into
gonna
the
let me in?
country because you've published all these great episodes with lawyers and whatnot. But the flight leaves Wednesday morning. Somehow, I would wager a guess that you'd find a way to do the most important work that you had on your plate that week in Monday and Tuesday. You wouldn't slack off as much. You would have a deeper
Hmm.
level of focus with the work you were doing. You would spend your energy wisely. You probably wouldn't stay up to, you would invest in probably getting a bit more sleep, maybe, if that provides you with more. You would do everything right to set yourself up to get a week's worth of work done in 2 days. So I think this is something we can do every day.
Right.
Maybe not to such an extreme where we're on such a tight deadline, but our time is limited. So why not? Why not do that?
You know what? I just occurred to me because it's kind of funny because I believe in that because
Yeah.
Parkinson's law, a task will extend or shrink to cover the amount of time it has. But it's exactly the same reason why getting up at 6 a.m. to kind of prep for this interview instead of the night before. But it's kind of funny that because your book's called Hyperfocus, and I just realized that I've always kind of that one concept followed, but I've always called it like stress focus, which is just funny. That's kind of very similar wording because you're right. Like you can just say, okay, great. Like I need to get this done. These are the things I need to get done, and just kind of like get into the zone and get that shit done. And most of us, when when we are kind of put in a situation, will magically pull a miracle out of
Yeah.
our butts and get it all done. And and that's just it. Like then we kind of think, well, why wasn't I doing
Yeah.
this way
Yeah.
all the time? You know what I mean? Yeah. But I think that's really great advice. Like in general, like just kind of segue for a second, but like, what do you think is some of the common disruptions that people have? Because again, I think that most people aren't really present and aware that like they are doing these things. But when you mention it, I think that the rest of today they're gonna be like, oh shit, I'm being unproductive again.
Yeah.
I'm doing all these distractions. So like,
Well,
what are some of the common ones that come
one of the
up?
fun parts about writing Hyperfocus is looking into the research on these ideas and talking to the experts and things like that. I feel a lot of people say they read research papers, but they don't actually, because once you begin to read one, you really have to tame distractions because your mind, gravitates to anything that's pleasurable, threatening, or novel. Everything in the world is more looking at the wall often is more pleasurable and novel than reading a research paper on the neuroscience of how our prefrontal cortex orients our attention. But Yeah, sorry, everybody
It's
tuned
already
out
hurting my
already.
brain.
But that's kind of the point to tame these things ahead of time. And so I don't know if you ever watch one of those crime shows where there's somebody's making a murder map, where there's a map attached to strings, attached to photos, attached to memos that some killer wrote. um,
Yep.
yeah,
Every
well,
Friday night I make my murder
we're
map and
we're learning a lot
have my
about
beer
you
and
on this
go and do some
episode of the
killing.
podcast, and I think listeners are now illuminated on what your life is. No, I'm just kidding. But
I, I think it's just aligning with like, yeah,
yeah,
everything I thought about Australians was true.
we should have kept them on the
bunch,
island.
bunch of
Oh
criminals.
no,
What the
I'm just
hell?
kidding. Man, I'm gonna get so many angry messages from Australians. But essentially, I had one of those murder maps, but with the way our attention works and all the research on it. And the curious thing about distraction, kind of zooming in on that part of our attention, which is such a big part of it, is when we're working in front of a computer, on average, we only work on one thing for 40 seconds before we switch to doing something else. And this study observed people what is called in situ, so at their actual desk, observing their actual patterns of behavior. And so this is kind of the state at which we work. But when it comes to what we switch to, when we switch away from what we really intend to be accomplishing, I see intention as what lies at the core of becoming productive. You can't be productive without setting an intention or choosing what you do before you do it. When you look at the things that derail us, we experience an equal number of interruptions and distractions that are external to us and internal to us. And so sometimes our mind will just kind of wander to some fantasy against our will. Sometimes we'll fall victim to something that's novel and pleasurable or threatening in the moment, like our smartphone. We'll do that instead of work, like when you said Parkinson's law exists and our work can expand a bit to fit its time available for its completion. And so, that's the fascinating thing about distraction. And I think it's worth segmenting. This is one of I don't have many recommended activities in the book, but this is one that I think is worth doing, where you divide the distractions and interruptions that you face over the course of the day. You can do kind of a 2x2 grid of this based on whether they're within or outside of your control. And second, whether they're annoying or whether they're fun. And so ones that you can that are outside of your control, that are annoying, you kind of deal with them and get back on track. The fun ones, you can enjoy them and get back on track, but all while keeping that original intention in mind. But luckily, the ones that are within our control, email, our smartphone, meetings that are sometimes unnecessary, the internet, the environment that we're in, the noises that we encounter, the notifications that come our way, whether they're annoying or whether they're fun, by dealing with them ahead of time, we prevent these would-be distractions from interfering with our attention and what we really want to accomplish. Because I think that's the main thing. We talk about internalizing these different ideas as it relates to productivity. The main thing to internalize with distraction is, in the moment, what we see as a distraction is something that we simply prefer to pay attention to over anything else on our plate. Facebook will always be a more attractive object of attention than a big email that we're writing. Instagram will always be a more attractive object of attention than a budget that we're updating in Excel. So by taming these things ahead of time, we essentially trap ourselves, much like with going on a vacation that leaves Wednesday morning. We kind of trap ourselves within the conditions where we have no choice but to increase how productive we are and how focused we are at the same time. And so that's, I think, the key thing when it comes to, and there are ways we can dive into how to deal with each of these things in turn. There are so many different techniques for that. But I think the key is to really separate out the ones you can control from the ones you cannot, so you can know which ones you can deal with ahead of time.
No, I think that's great. And you also, you kind of talk about it too, as like tracking where your distractions go. I mean, do you believe in like time tracking? Sorry, yeah, I guess like time tracking, like tracking like where how much time is being spent on social media, how much time is being spent on certain things, like starting to document like what's the typical day like, where are my distractions? Like, do you think it's important to kind of do that evaluation at the very beginning of making this big kind of change of being
Yeah, I
aware
think it's helpful.
of where your time goes?
And yeah, time tracking is weird because it's such an ugly thing to do in the moment. I know, and you've had her on the show, Laura Vanderkam. She's a friend of mine, a colleague
Mm-hmm.
in the productivity space, and she's tracked her time, I think, every day for the last 10 years or something. So occasionally she goes back and crunches all the numbers. Okay, how much time have I spent with my family over time? And I think, it's personal productivity advice, right? And because of that, it's personal. And so what works for one person might not work for another. And so I would say that if you don't have an awareness of where your time goes, sometimes where your mind goes, where your time goes will surprise you. People watch way more TV than they think they do. I think the average American watches 4 or 5 hours every single day. People spend a lot more time on social media and their phone than they think they do. So bringing some awareness to that, I think doing so for a few days is a helpful exercise because then you can see your pain points where you need to improve. But it's not, I will say, full disclosure, that it's not for me. I have a little time tracking cube on my desk here. It's like a 6 or an 8-sided thing called Timemuller, where each side is labeled with an activity. And so if I'm in front of the computer, I'll often do this. One side says writing, one side says meditation, one side says working out, one side says reading, and so one side says email, one side says meetings, one side says coaching, and so I'll just flip it so whatever task I'm happen to be doing faces upward. But and so it's ideas like that
Mm-hmm.
can help us with time tracking, but I think that's a big part of it too, is how we track our time. But some things, by the way, email is a great example of this, where it consumes more of our attention than it does time. We check our email, if we're average, 88 times every day, 11 times every hour. But we only spend maybe an hour total on it throughout the day, depending on the work we do, obviously. So some tasks consume more attention than they do time, simply because we're thinking about them as we're doing other things. There's that sort of residue that exists from that task because we're switching between things so often. So I think, time tracking is helpful, but it also doesn't give the full picture.
Right. I think that's a good point too. Is like I'm a big fan of kind of eliminating distractions, in the sense that like most of the time my phone's on airplane mode or do not disturb, and that way I can go and check all my missed calls, and I can go see all my email when I'm ready to be distracted, and then I can kind of chase it all up. And the same way that, like, as you mentioned, social media, every single time someone likes a comment or whatever, it's popping up on your phone, and I think that's a great kind of dopamine hit to be like,
It's
oh, I'm so great,
validation
people
hit
liking
too.
my shit. But for me, like, turning, it is, it totally is. And I do think that it's just one of those things that, like, by turning all that shit off, it's just liberating. Buddy of mine, Noah Kagan, he actually had some really good advice about Facebook. There's like an extension you can get for Google Chrome that it replaces your Facebook wall with just like a really intelligent quote or whatever. And I think it's really great because what happens is you're like, I'm bored, I'm going to go on Facebook. And then you go on there and you're like, oh,
Instead you
nothing's
see
on
a
Facebook.
quote like,
Okay, cool.
like
And you go back to work.
procrastination is
Instead of, like,
masturbation.
getting
Yeah, Jim Carrey.
yeah, Jim Carrey, cable guy. Another Canadian. But yeah, I mean, I think that, by eliminating all those things that are, it's not even about avoiding things, it's just literally just turning off all these things that you're allowing into your life. It allows you to kind of take that back. And do you think that designated time to your day to kind of do email?
Oh yeah, for sure. And apps like Freedom is a great example of a distractions blocker. Cold Turkey is another good example of a distractions blocker. Cold Turkey is great because if you want to access these things, you can whitelist blacklist some distractions. That's the right color, right? Blacklist is when you block the things. Yeah. But so you can blacklist things that you have problems with. So if Reddit isn't blocked by default, which it is, you can add that to the list. But it's great because you have to actually restart your computer in order to access these sites again. If you do any writing for your work, there's an app called Cold Turkey Writer, where once you launch it, it says, okay, how many words do you want to write, or how long do you want to write for? And it hijacks your computer until you write that level. And so it's a great way to, it's such an incredible
That's
way to
awesome.
trap yourself into productivity. Trapping yourself into productivity. That's a good episode title.
I was thinking, I like that. Yeah, you're right. That's the next title of your book, next book. No, like I was thinking that'd be great for the gym. In fact, be like you got to do an extra mile.
Exactly. We're locking the door, and you have to spend the night
yeah.
here if you don't run that mile. But yeah, on the distractions point, one of my favorite rituals, because focusing on things is sometimes difficult. Sometimes we have an aversion to it. It gets better over time as we chip away at how stimulated we are by default. How stimulated we are by default dictates how difficult it will be for us to tame distractions. And so if we're more stimulated by default, something we can do to shrink our kind of that level of focus. I love giving people tactical stuff. So here's something tactical to, if you want to focus on something important, get into one of these distraction-free modes, is shrink how long you'll focus for until you no longer feel a resistance to focusing on something. And so you might say, okay, can I write this thing for 45 minutes? No, the thought of it puts me off. Okay, what about 30 minutes? It's getting, what about 20? 15? Yeah, I could work on this for 15 minutes. So you tame distractions. You put on your noise canceling headphones. You make a cup of coffee if you're into coffee. And then you set a timer for 15 minutes, preferably on a device that won't distract you. And you force yourself to focus on it for 15 minutes. And if you feel like keeping going past that point, you can, but you don't have to. And what's helpful is after this time, treat yourself to a distractions break. Veg out on an all-you-can-eat buffet of distractions. Go to every social media site under the sun, every news website, to reward yourself for focusing, because you deserve it. Because that's the thing about this state, is this state of total focus. I call this state hyperfocus, where we bring our complete deliberate attention to one thing. It's difficult at first, and we need to treat ourselves a little bit. And it's hard to lower that level of stimulation by default. And so you might find that when you get that Facebook feed whiteout, a plugin, or when you get cold turkey or freedom or self-control is another good example of one, or rescue time. There's a lot of distractions blockers out there, that you feel kind of restlessness and anxious as you adjust downwards into a state of lower stimulation. But the lower you're stimulated by default up to a point, the deeper you're able to think, and the better you're able to focus on one thing for. And the quality of your attention goes up. You're able to focus for longer. Your mind wanders less against your will. You work with greater intention throughout the day. What you lose in speed, you make up for 5 times over, and how much more deliberately you work. And so this is, I think, a state we need to get more often, even though it's difficult to get there in the first place.
That's great. So you think in general, like kind of training yourself to be less distracted is kind of the ultimate goal. Kind of like meditation is like one of the hardest things to, at least like kind of meditation where you're not going to think or do too much. Like you're definitely, it's a hard thing to kind of get into that state of just staying in one place and without being distracted. So, I mean, do you think it's something that you do to kind of
absolutely. And this book, Hyperfocus, it spawned from an uncomfortable state. I make my living as somebody who gives advice and gives talks and coaches people on becoming more productive. But I noticed that after my first book came out, I was more distracted than I had been in years when I came off of that deadline. I attended to social media more often. I allowed email to seep into my life. And I was distracted for a large portion of the day. And I thought, like, if this is a problem that I face as somebody who's such a nerd about productivity, maybe it's something that A, other people face also, but B, that I'm missing the bigger picture about, and that other people are too. And so I started doing that, creating that murder map about how our attention works and flying out to talk to experts and things. But at the start, I couldn't really focus for 5 or 10 minutes on one thing. But now that I can focus for something for 1 or 2 hours at a time with a deep level of energy and focus. And that's not to that's not, I don't mean that as a brag, but I mean that as this is completely something that we can all chip away at over time to get to that same level of greater productivity, where we're able to write that book, we're able to ship that big project. So this is really, I really do believe it's something that we need to chip away at over time. And the tough part about this is the boredom that seeps in, because boredom, I've come to realize, is something we experience when we immediately lower our level of stimulation. And so we go from at a high level to suddenly at a lower level, where we're just laying on the couch after tending to distraction for an hour. And, we're looking around for something to do, something that will stimulate our mind. And so that's something that, boredom's such an uncomfortable feeling, even though it's a sign that we're working in a good direction.
So you did an experiment on making yourself bored for a month, right? And when I read that, I instantly thought, like, is this guy married? Because, how do you do that with a partner? Like, hey, I'm gonna just kind of like isolate myself and purposely be bored. So,
my fiance is very
no fun
patient.
stuff for us for the next month.
She's God bless her. There's been a lot of experiments that have been tough for but that have tested this patience. There was one where I lived like a total slob for a week, where I ordered takeout a few times. Yeah, how's it working out?
I did that for a
It seems to be
lifetime.
working
It's
out well
awesome.
for you, actually. You seem to be doing well. Yeah, this is.
It's going great.
No, I'm saying
Absolutely.
if
go
people
ahead.
take
I'm
one
really
lesson
interested
away,
in,
it's that
hearing
being
about
a
this.
slob. Actually, I think laziness is underrated as it relates to productivity. I'm probably one of the lazier people you'll ever meet. Yeah, it's like using your
Controlled
laziness to your
laziness.
advantage. It's like, okay, of course I'm going to be lazy in the moment. I'm going to tend to Instagram. Maybe I need to like trick myself and put my phone in an opposite end of the studio or the house. But yeah, this boredom experiment. So I purposefully, it was just for an hour a day to kind of periodically sample my thoughts and feelings around boredom. So for an hour a day, I purposely made myself bored, because I found, focusing all day long, it's exhausting. Right? We never really have a chance to recharge. We never can replenish our attention. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna try boredom out. And so it's not really something we experience that often, just when we ratchet down from a state of high into a state of low stimulation. So for a month, I made myself bored. So one day I read the iTunes terms and conditions. Another day I circled all the zeros and counted them up in the first 10,000 digits of pi. Another day I watched one cloud in the sky. Another day I waited on hold with Air Canada's baggage claims department. Funny thing about that is they lost one of my carry-on bags a few weeks prior to doing how do you lose a fucking carry-on bag?
Wow.
But they lost one of these bags a few weeks prior, and so I was dealing with this nice lady at Air Canada's baggage claims department. So I got in to talk to the department after about 25 minutes, and this same lady answers the phone. And so I thought, okay, it's a fluke. I hung up immediately because I needed to fill an hour. I called again. I got through again, and the same lady picked up again. Yeah. I have this
She is
theory,
Air
and I'd
Canada's
love for a
support
representative of
worldwide.
Air Canada. And I'm speaking about this theory in several interviews that I'm doing around so I'm really bashing Air Canada's baggage claims department, but they really need to hire a second person, because maybe then the wait time would be down to 3 or 4 minutes instead of 25 minutes. But the idea behind the experiment was making myself bored while periodically sampling where my mind was. And the main conclusion that I drew from it, I'm a big nerd about traffic flow in addition to productivity. I nerd about a lot of things: knitting, mechanical keyboards, all sorts of things. But traffic flow is fascinating, because if you look at what allows traffic to continue flowing down a highway, it's not how fast individual cars are moving that allows the traffic to continue moving forward, but rather it's how much space exists between the cars that allows them to continue moving forward. And I am a big believer that our work is the same way. And the thing about distraction is that these distraction breaks are amazing, where we treat ourselves to a buffet of distractions for 10 or 15 minutes after focusing for 45. But when these distractions fill the time between tasks, I think this costs us a ton of productivity. We resist ratcheting down into a state of lower stimulation and just letting our attention rest. But at the same time, this resting of our attention is one of the best things that we can do, not only for our productivity, but for our creativity as well. Because the way our attention works is we only expend the mental energy when we regulate our attention in one way or another. So when we make a decision, when we have to force ourselves to focus on something in one of these ways. And the thing about letting our attention rest is that when it's resting, when we're doing something habitual, when we're, taking a shower, when we're swimming laps, when we're having our morning coffee with just journaling in a notepad, our mind wanders to some fascinating places. And we think about our goals when our mind is at rest and wandering 14 times as much compared to when we're focused on something. And if you think back to when your best ideas strike you, you're probably not focused on much either. Especially the larger eureka insights you might have. You're probably not focused on something. You're probably taking a shower or going for a walk or letting your mind rest. Maybe you're playing a video game and your mind is wandering a little bit. And it's because, this experiment, it led me to the fascinating places our mind wanders to. And I'm not advocating for boredom, by the way. Boredom is an uncomfortable emotion. And after experiencing it for 30 hours in that month, or 31 hours, whatever it was, I'm not convinced that it's something that we need more of. But what I do think we need more of is the space between the things in our work. We need to make more room on the highway. And it's because where our mind wanders too. We wander to think about the future whenever our mind is wandering 48% of the time. And this is the time that we spend thinking about our goals. It's it's when we think about what we're going to do next. And it wanders to the present 28% of the time. So this is when we think strategically about what we're doing. And it wanders to the past less than we would expect, around 12% of the time. The rest of the time, our mind is dull or blank. And so when it bounces between these three mental destinations, the past to the present to the future, to the present to the future to the past, this is when we connect ideas that we accumulate in our mind in the past, in the present. This is when we rest and let our attention just kind of be. This is when we plan. This is when we set intentions. And so if intention lies at the heart of productivity, and we don't really think about our goals much when we're focused, we need to unfocus deliberately. And I call this attentional mode scatter focus, because there's really no name for deliberate mind wandering. And I think it's something we need to get more of for those three reasons. A, because we can rest. 2, because we can generate ideas. And C, because we can plan for the future.
That's great. Yeah, because again,
I heard they sent it to you a bit late, a couple days ago.
I was really curious about scatter focus. Well, yeah, I actually hadn't checked my mailbox in a while, and I'm like, oh crap, I intentionally need to go and check it because of that. And then UPS dropped it off 2 days ago. I'm like, okay, good. I'm not being lazy. It's UPS has been lazy. Cool. But yeah, I was really curious about scatter focus and how that kind of plays into it. So I'm definitely gonna be reading through Hyperfocus when we get off the call, because I do think you're absolutely right. Like having, kind of giving yourself permission, and also kind of putting aside time to be able to go the opposite way is a way to kind of give into it a little bit to allow yourself to get back on track. Because I think that whether it is dieting, exercise, work schedule, whatever it is, if you just try and build this like ultra unrealistic expectation, I'm gonna do 1,000% at every given moment, you're eventually gonna break down, and when you do, you're gonna veer completely off track. But if you kind of allow and anticipate that things are gonna pop up and you control when they come in, that alone is going to definitely help you kind of, anticipating those problems coming up allows you.
And the fascinating thing about the two mental modes, the focused and the unfocused mode, is that on a neurological level, they're even anti-correlated with one another. And so when the brain network that supports hyperfocus is activated, the task positive network in our mind. The task negative network, or the default network in our mind, is not activated as much. And same with vice versa. When our mind is wandering, this focus network of our mind is not activated. And so, in other words, what this means on a non-neurological level is that we can't both focus on something and reflect on something at the same time. But it's only by reflecting on something that we think strategically about it. And so I think this is why, if you feel that you're in kind of this responsive cycle with the work that you're doing, with the life you're living, whatever part of your life you happen to be feeling this with, look to that. Look at, okay, how often do I leave some space between things? If I'm at dinner with somebody, do I immediately pick up my phone and tap around mindlessly when they're at the bathroom, instead of reflecting on the meaningful conversation we're having, or the things we're learning? Whatever it happens to be, look for the space at that point, because you'll be surprised.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And just to kind of go through a few subjects, like one thing I do really want to talk about was isolation, which you mentioned at the very beginning, because I'm kind of curious, like, because you were basically talking about kind of eliminating other people, and how, I guess, external distractions like people can influence your productivity.
Yeah, that
So
was
how does that play in? Like,
that was kind of hell. That experiment, because we don't realize how much other people motivate us and give us energy. And the reason for this is we can do our work for one of two reasons. We can do it for intrinsic reasons or extrinsic reasons. And a lot of people focus on the extrinsic reasons for becoming more productive. I want to make more money. I want to have more power. I want more people to know my name. But the intrinsic reasons are, research shows, much more motivating than the extrinsic ones. And so intrinsic ones might be the love of the craft, the want to help people out, something that connects with us on a deeper level. So other people motivate us quite a bit. Nothing will be more motivating for us at work than having a best friend, or even a friend that works on the same team that we do. And so not being around people for 10 days, I believe it was hell. I lost all motivation, but people are the intrinsic reason why we do what we do. And so I noticed this with a lot of the speaking that I do. So I do a lot of talks, and if you're familiar with the keynote, the speaking industry, there's a good amount of money in doing just one talk for 1 hour. And I found that there was a certain point where I started to do it for the money. And it was precisely at that point that the quality of the talks that I gave, the feedback wasn't as good. There were fewer standing ovations at the end, and things of that nature. And so I thought, okay, what changed? And it took me a little while to think about what did, but it was that I started to focus on the money and the extras. Oh, I want people to recognize, I want, things like that. But when I started to focus on just trying to help people out in a 1 hour talk as much as I possibly could, that's when things started to turn around. And so I think productivity, it's much the same way in general, where, people don't only motivate us, but they should be the reason why we strive to become more productive in the first place. Like, if you woke up and some like nightmare apocalypse scenario happened overnight, and you're the only person left on the planet, and somehow the internet was still working because the power grid stayed up, this is a hypothetical scenario. Everybody's dead, so it's definitely a hypothetical scenario, except for you. Yeah, no social media. Yeah, you probably get a lot done. So it's easy to get stuff done. You're hyper productive. You get a lot accomplished. How productive were you, really, if you have nobody to share the fruits of that productivity with? And so this speaks to an essential idea that we've touched on a little bit, that we need that deeper reason beyond money, beyond success by any traditional measure, why we should strive to become more productive. We need to connect with that deeper reason, or else we're not going to give a shit. we're just gonna tread water. We're gonna tend to distractions more often, and we're just gonna ship our deadlines without shipping anything else that's important. And so I think it's such an essential idea that we connect with what we're doing on that deeper intrinsic level. And if you can't connect with your work on that deeper intrinsic level and you don't give a shit about your work, find something you do give a shit about, because you'll be naturally more productive doing that. And this speaks to our attention too, in that we only expend mental energy when we regulate our attention in one way or another. And the more you care about your work by default, the less you're going to have to force yourself to focus on that work. And so what that means is you have so much more energy. You have to take fewer breaks even, because you don't need to stock up on your supply of energy. You're able to become wholly immersed in what you're doing, so that you enter one of those flow states, what researcher Mihai Csikszentmihalyi refers to as a flow state, where you look up at the clock, you think half an hour has gone by, but 5 hours have gone by. This is something that is so critical, that we connect with our work on that deeper intrinsic level, because if we can't, being productive is, we could have all the hacks in the world, but we might not get there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And also, like, I guess like accountability in a way can be really effective too, because like what you're saying about if everyone's dead, then what, you're not gonna have, like, whether it is just even accountability in the sense of you get to brag about how you crushed it today, you got so much done, the validation for other people, like that kind of external force. You're right, like it isn't just about what your duty is, it's also about being able to, how it reflects in other people's eyes and what expectations they have of you. There's a lot of external motivations that can help you.
One of my favorite strategies that I recommend is having an accountability partner with your work. And I do this with some of the people. I don't coach too many people at one time, but I do this with some of them, where they send me their 3 intentions that they want to accomplish every day. And at the end of the day, I ask, okay, how'd they go? And, they have to have that level of accountability. I do this with somebody because it keeps me accountable, because I fall into the same pitfalls that everybody else on the planet does. And that extra level where, you're trapping yourself into becoming productive, but it's those constraints are exactly what make your work happen.
That's great. I'm just writing that down, actually. Because again, I think that's really powerful too. Is when you're actually responsible to accountable, I guess is the only other way to put it. But to talk to someone at the end of the day and say, hey, I didn't get what I set out to do. Like that's motivation for you to say, okay, like shit. Now that there is, I'm not the only person who was going to find out that I've been slacking.
Yeah, and have somebody who will kind of push you a little bit and say, okay, these 3 things, they're not what you're capable of. I've seen you do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's good too. You're right. Like rather than just saying, okay, well, try harder tomorrow. But you're right. Like
the quality control.
Push you, and also have that quality control is going to control your output. That's great. And I guess like an important one that I know that you touch on is meetings. And like I used to work for Industrial Light and Magic, which most people know, like George Lucas' old company, did Star Wars, everything else. And ILM is the acronym, but everyone there used to always call ILM I love meetings, because all you do is you do like 60% meetings, and then you gotta like try and cram in all your work in the 2 or 3 hours you have left. So like, what are your thoughts on meetings as a whole? And I guess
as a whole, I think it depends where you work. There are some meetings where they have where there's kind of that agile culture, and meetings aren't really a problem. They're just kind of essential. And there are other meetings where often when things are more bureaucratic, people reflect too much on what they're doing, and so they want the confirmation from others, and they want to really consult everybody before making even the smallest of decisions. So I think kind of reflect on where you fall on that spectrum. Are you on the excuse me? Are you on that the side where you have too many meetings, or are you on the side where you maybe even have too little, and the team you're on is less coherent because of that, and cohesive because of that? But one of the biggest suggestions that I could offer up for meetings is it's remarkable how many meetings don't have an agenda, or B, a goal. Like, how do you know if a meeting went well? Everybody just kind of walks away and Like, okay, see you guys later. How do you know a meeting achieved its purpose? And most meetings
Hmm.
don't have a purpose. A lot of meetings have an agenda, but how do you know if a meeting went well? And so that would be the main piece of advice that I offer up is never attend in a meeting without an agenda or without a purpose. And so, it's easy advice to give, but sometimes you have to be political about it, and kind of manage office politics and attend a few that are with your boss's boss that are basically just full of bullshit. But I think having that focus, and especially if you're in a position where you lead a team of other people, that is so essential. Because a meeting without an agenda or a goal is a meeting that shouldn't exist. And oftentimes when I push back on somebody who wants some of my time, and I ask them, okay, what did you want to ask? Or what would make the call successful for you? They say, oh, actually, I could just shoot you a few questions over email. And then suddenly I get an hour of my time back when I wasn't tending to some bullshit low return meeting for an hour. But another thing that we can do is look at your calendar and look at every single recurring meeting that's on there and really question the value of those meetings, because sometimes we attend them out of habit without challenging their existence in the first place. And so, that's kind of another point to check. Another point to check is the attendance list on a meeting. So sometimes everybody invites everybody under the sun, but everybody doesn't really need to be there at the same time. And so maybe, if you're in a position where you're running a meeting, say to everybody, okay, everybody's welcome, but for these folks, we can fill you in later if you have something more important going on. And, it's a way of respecting people's time while being kind and not wasting a lot of man hours and setting your team behind and ultimately setting yourself behind because your work is intertwined with those of others. And one other idea I'd offer up is if a meeting passes these criteria, so either you have to attend it and it doesn't have an agenda, or it has a great agenda and a goal. It's recurring, but it's important. You're meant to be there. Really focus on the meeting. Leave your phone in another room. Encourage other people to do the same, saying like all our time is valuable. Let's get through this list quick. Let's do what we need to do and have some fun, hopefully. And then maybe it's 4 p.m. and you want to have some beers with the people in your meeting because apparently that's a thing. Maybe, go through, actually focus on the meeting because it's probably valuable. That's the advice I'd offer up.
Mhm. No, I think it's great. And like, that's one thing I found like, in productions. I mean, usually you have like dailies when you work on a film. And I think a lot of people love that because it's just like, great, I get to sit on a couch in a theater room and just kind of goof off for a bit. But what I found to be really efficient when you do have those deadlines is just to have like a production coordinator run and get someone, like they can see a list of like, these are the people that need to be here, but just run and get them as
and
they're
something
about to be
else to
called up,
keep
like
in
5 10
mind,
minutes beforehand.
and it's one thing to
Just
talk about distractions, and I came into this project thinking, okay, I need to be focused 100% of the day. How do I do this? But sometimes interruption is kind of an essential part of collaboration. I'd go so far as to say it's even a necessary byproduct of collaboration. And so there's kind of the two types of work that we do, and our work exists somewhere on this spectrum. The projects in our work exist somewhere on this spectrum. On the left, there's the hyper collaborative things we do, and on the right, there's the focus work that we do. And so something that's hyper collaborative might be like launching a satellite at NASA or at SpaceX, where everybody needs to be communicating with everybody at the same time. Interruptions are a necessary byproduct because it's how information flows. It's how you get information from other people, and they get information and dig inside your mind to find what you're working on and what ideas you have. And on the opposite end is the novelist who's locked in his office, who focuses on writing every single minute of the day. And so they can't have distractions nearby because those are more pleasurable, more novel, more threatening in the moment than what they truly want to be doing. And so whatever you're doing in the moment exists somewhere on that spectrum. And so if it's more on the collaborative side, maybe don't tame all the distractions in your work because some of them might be necessary. But if you're doing focus work and you're working on a project that requires deep focus and benefits from it, tame all the distractions that you possibly can. But sometimes with the collaborative work, like a film, a great example of that, it falls more on that collaborative side. And so maybe you need more of a balance between the two modes.
That's right. I really liked Obama's second election, like his whole team, rather than being on the phone calling each other 24/7, just trying to stay in constant contact. Everyone just had a chat room and they'd be on their Blackberries. And that way, you're right, like depending on the right environment, something like that, you want information selectively to kind of come in that you can keep tabs on the whole time, rather than having to wait for one person to come and update you on everything going on. It's just like a constant feed. But you're right, then when you're on the other end of things where you're trying to get one thing done and only one thing done, then that's the nightmare scenario.
Precisely.
Of like a complete disruption to what you're doing. What are your thoughts on multitasking? Because again, like it's one of those things that I always good. I already like your response. Because again, like I love when I hear people brag about like I'm a really good multitasker. It's just like great. Like I'm not. My whole week's gone to shit because I had one big task to do, and therefore I've like been kind of down in the trenches doing that. And I think that anyone who's multitasking, you're essentially distributing your attention 5%, 10% to everything, which means nothing.
Multitasking really is one of, and I would include myself in this group of people, where I went into writing this book with some preconceptions about multitasking, where it was a terrible, terrible thing. And the research that I found changed that on some level. First of all, it's important to make a distinction between multitasking and task switching. So rapidly switching between things at once. So multitasking is when we pay attention to more than one thing simultaneously, which isn't really possible because we can't really direct our attention toward more than one thing. And task switching is when we're kind of in that 40-second mode where every 40 seconds or lower, we switch between things every 35 seconds when we have things like Slack open. But that, I think, is what people refer to when they talk about multitasking. And rapid task switching is one of the worst things that we can possibly do for our productivity. And the reason that this is the case is because of an idea called attentional residue, where within our attention, as we switch from doing one thing to doing another, there are remnants from the previous thing that we were just doing that remain in our attentional space. And so, we're having this conversation right now. I might go after the conversation to make a cup of coffee. And when I'm making that cup of coffee, I'm not going to be focusing on it 100%. Instead, I'm going to be recalling a lot of the things we talked about. And so so hopefully the latter part
hopefully
of the
not some of the earlier
conversation where
ones.
we got all professional and prim and proper, but that happens all the time throughout the day, especially when we're not on a tight deadline. When we're on a tight deadline with a task and then we switch to doing something else, we actually think about it less because that time pressure also creates some confidence in what we were just doing. But there's always this residue. And so when we switch between tasks, especially when it's on a shorter time frame, like 40 seconds or even a minute or even 5 minutes, there's always some remnants from what we were just doing that occupy our attentional space. And this costs us in productivity because we don't have enough attention to give to what we just switched to. So in other words, like computer parlance, our attentional space is like our RAM. It's kind of what we hold in our mind in the moment. And this costs us a lot of productivity. And so you think like, okay, if it costs like 10% productivity, it might not be that bad because, it makes your work a bit more stimulating. You release more dopamine. Things are more stimulating. They're more fun. I'm more engaged. But the research shows that our work takes about 50% longer when compared to when we just focus on one thing from start through completion because of this attentional residue. And when it comes to, so that's task switching. With multitasking, we can multitask, but, and it's a big but here, only with habits. Because who's to say that you can't walk while you chew bubble gum, while you listen to a podcast or an audiobook, while you avoid
Right.
stepping on the cracks in the sidewalk? We can do this. And it's because habits only require active attention when we have to intervene on them. And so when we don't have to intervene on them, when we're driving our familiar route home, we don't really have to regulate our attention to focus on that drive. And so we can instead become immersed in the conditions of the road if things are hectic, or in a talk radio station that we happen to be listening to on the drive. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. We can't focus on more than one thing at one time. We just can't do that, unless it's a habit. At most, we can switch, we can fit kind of one complex thing and one tiny habit in our attentional space. We can fold laundry while we listen to a podcast, for example. But when it comes to the most productive and meaningful things that we can focus on, a conversation, an edit, a meeting, whatever, an important message we're typing up, a report, an Excel sheet, whatever it happens to be, these tasks benefit from as much attention as we can possibly bring to them. And so the less often we switch from doing one thing to another, the less residue we have that remains in our attention, and the less time our work takes, because we're able to become more immersed in what we're doing, and things don't take 50% longer. And so I think, yeah, multitasking it's something I talk a lot about in Hyperfocus, because simply put, a lot of the advice that people give is bullshit. And most of the advice that people get is bullshit too. And I found myself falling victim to that trap. But yeah, it's not really, I agree with you. It's not really something that we can do. But task switching is it's even more costly, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right, because like it's kind of like how you talked about flow state before, because again, to go in a flow state, you don't just switch like Alt Tab and you're in into the next thing. Like it takes time to kind of get in the zone.
Yeah, we have
and
like 30
every single
tabs
time you're pulled
open in
out
our
of it,
mind
it takes some time to
at
get
once,
back
and
on track again.
it's not tenable. It's not a good situation. But luckily, like, here's the fascinating thing to kind of riff on what we were just talking about with how many things we can fit into our attention. The frame that I use for this idea, I love this idea, and this is the fun part about talking to a more technical audience is, they actually know what RAM is. If I'm talking to the New York Times or something, it's not an analogy that a lot of people can relate to. So I'm happy that that people can understand this idea. But there are certain things, this attentional space that we have that allows us to focus on things. It's the RAM of our mind, but in research, it's known as our working memory capacity. And so it's essentially our mental scratch pad. If right now you add up 62 and 84 in your mind, you use your working memory capacity to run through that mental arithmetic, maybe use the visual centers in your mind to kind of visualize the two numbers sitting on top of each other with the addition sign and carrying the number over if you need to. This is what we use our working memory capacity for. But this attentional space that we have is very, very limited. It's limited in two ways. First of all, we can only focus on so much at once. But second of all, we can only hold so much in our mind at one time. We can hold, at best, 3 or 4 chunks of information together. And this is why, phone numbers are a great example of this. If I'm telling you my phone number, I don't say my phone number is 1,613,844,000. I say my phone number is 1-613-898, whatever. And so we chunk things together into these units. But the fascinating thing about our attention is we're able to increase how much attention we have to give to everything in the moment. We talk about taking fewer breaks and not getting enough sleep, for example. Not getting enough sleep shrinks how much we're able to process in the moment by an average across studies of 58%. And so in other words, we have 40% of our regular amount of attention when we're working on a sleep deficit. And this is remarkable because, on a sleep deficit, we assess our productivity to be greater than it actually is, but we take on less meaningful and valuable tasks. You might notice this if you're tired, you tend to more distractions, and it's because you have fewer attentional resources at your disposal to actually focus on complex things in the first place. But other practices actually increase the amount of RAM in our mind. We essentially add an extra stick of RAM in our mind. And the one that does this better than anything else is I'm getting excited. I just slammed my desk. Is is one that we mentioned a couple times already, and that's meditation. Meditate. One study had participants meditate for 45 minutes twice a week, and they found that after a period of just 2 weeks, that their working memory capacity, the size of their attentional space, how much they were able to do in the moment, how much they were able to process and focus on, increased by 30%. And that's relative to two other groups, one of whom practiced yoga for a couple weeks, didn't have an effect. One of which I think read or something like that did nothing. Meditation increases how much attentional space we have to give to our important work in the moment. And so that's a fascinating thing too, is, our attention is limited, and, it's limited so we can't multitask. We can't pay attention to more than one thing at one time. We can't carry on 3 or 4 conversations at once, but there are ways that we can make it bigger. And the best way to do that is by meditating and also deliberately managing our attention in the first place.
That's really cool. And you kind of touched on it like before we officially kicked things off, when things were even more vulgar. And that was, I was talking about overtime versus productivity, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about here too, about, working less can equal more, and like working, especially in our industry, it's like renowned for just ridiculously stupid hours. And a lot of times, like I think of like I won't name some of the big studios, but there are some who will start doing 6-day weeks a year before a movie is actually coming out, and like then 6 months before a movie's coming out, 7-day weeks. And a lot of time it's like, is that absolutely necessary? I just banged my desk with my elbow, so I'm getting intense too.
Yeah.
But do you think that
Smashing
like
notes and shit.
we're gonna start breaking stuff soon? But yeah, I mean, I think that that is one of those things that there's an unnecessary amount of burnout and mistakes being made, things like that, from sleep deprivation. Like I've done like 150 hour, like consistently for 3 months, 150 hour weeks where I would literally sleep probably 3 hours or 4 hours a week. And, just like really fucked up conditions that, like the worst of it was, about 3 months in Berlin where I did, on average, like maybe 7 hours a week, and I did it for 3 months, and it took me like 6 months to recover, where I could not work at all. I just was completely burned out beyond recovery. And I've had like a lot of conversations about like burnout in general, because I think it's just one of those things that most of us don't really think about. We're just like, no, like, you wear it on your sleeve, like you're proud that like I did an all-nighter last night.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you're absolutely useless after a couple of days of doing that. So what are your thoughts on?
I think the key thing to understand is that
cases?
we assess our productivity as significantly higher than it actually is when we're working on a sleep deficit. And so if we're doing work, here's the thing about working on a sleep deficit. If we're doing work that it's okay we do that work with 40% of our mental capacity, that we usually do. If we're doing mindless data entry, we might make a few extra mistakes that we can go back and fix, and our productivity won't actually suffer that much. But if we're doing something that's complex, that actually takes advantage of our skill set and what we're trained to do, that actually benefits from the extra amount of attention that we can give to it, that requires a deeper level of focus, we have to avoid that trap. And it really is a trap, assessing our productivity is higher than it is. And it's because we're less aware of our productivity and our own actions when we're working on a sleep deficit. The best research that I've found on this, and by the way, researching this is the tough part about researching productivity, is you can kind of research the things that contribute to productivity, such as energy. But when you get to assessing productivity itself as its own construct, everybody has a different definition of what it means to be productive. And so do take this study with a grain of salt. But the best one that I found that after about 35 hours a week, our marginal productivity for every hour we work past that point begins to diminish until I think around 60 hours, where we are about the same. It levels off. And this is remarkable, I think, because we're simply not aware of our energy, of how much we're able to accomplish. And so I would say use this as a test. So one of the best pieces of advice I could offer is that the best productivity tactics out there are self-reinforcing. And so in other words, they lead you to accomplish more. You're able to notice that you accomplish more doing them, and so you keep doing them. And so there's a reason we don't work on a sleep deficit 100% of the time. And I think it's because our marginal productivity goes down. But I would also ask folks to do that, is notice how much less you accomplish when you're working on a sleep deficit. Don't look at how busy you are. Instead, look at how much you accomplish. Because busyness is such an odd indicator as it relates to our productivity. It kind of tricks us into thinking we're productive. But when busyness doesn't lead us to accomplish anything of importance, it's essentially just an active form of laziness when we bounce around between pleasurable, novel, and threatening things all day long and not really move our work forward. We kind of play the role of traffic cop and keep up with things. And so I would say bring that awareness to how much you actually accomplish. Productivity is such a loaded term, right? But I don't think it's about how much you produce. It's about how much you actually accomplish, because that's what's different at the end of the day after you lived a day of your life. And so look at what you accomplish, and more than that, look at whether you accomplish what you set out to do in the first place. Look at whether the things you're setting out to do are less complex and require less of your skills than what you usually do because you have less energy. And that's kind of a way to avoid that trap. But yeah, after a period of about 35 hours, our marginal productivity begins to diminish. So keep that in mind too.
That's great. That's really cool. And I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to try and tie 3 questions together really quick. But one thing I know you've talked about is kind of strategically using caffeine at certain times of the day to kind of boost productivity. The other side of it was going to be, and kind of what you touched on a little bit, was energy. And do you have any recommendations, hacks for getting more energy throughout the day? Because we obviously have those lulls where it's fuck everything, I need to go get some Starbucks or whatever. So whether it is working out or other things that can kind of help you kind of get more energetic.
I would say take a proper break.
You're weighing 1,000 pounds.
Most of us just fucking chill, man. What the hell is wrong? No, I'm just kidding.
Chill.
Most of us don't break properly. We what we see as a break so often is switching from something that's work related to something personal related. And so we switch from looking at a screen at work to just looking at another shiny rectangle that happens to be in our pocket and bouncing around between the news and social media sites. But remember, we expend mental energy when we regulate our attention in one way or another. And the best way to recharge is to let your attention rest and to do something that's habitual. So whether it's going for a walk around the block, whether it's swimming laps, whether it's scheduling a quick massage in the middle of the day, whether it's walking to grab a coffee with just a notepad and not your phone. Maybe it's listening to a podcast that you find genuinely recharges you. Doing something habitual also leads us to more creative insights than doing anything else that lets our mind wander. It's more fun. We're able to rest at the same time too, while we actually let our mind wander to plan for the future and think more strategically. And so I think this is time that it won't just let us rest and recharge, but that will actually make back in terms of being able to work strategically more often, which again, going back, tying the episode in a bow, is what we should look for in the productivity advice we consume, that we make the time back and then some. With caffeine, it's caffeine is fun. I love caffeine. I just finished a coffee before we were chatting. I don't know if you could tell, but it boosts our mental and our physical performance by almost every single possible measure. It leads us to focus longer. It allows us to perseverate on tasks that we find difficult and aversive. It narrows our attention, so we're able to zero in on something that we happen to be working on better than anything else. It makes our attention more inhibited, so we're less likely to fall victim to internal distraction, even though we might seek out more external distractions because our mind is at a more stimulated state, and we want to stay there by focusing on things that are novel and releasing more dopamine in our mind. But the advice that I would give is to drink caffeine strategically instead of habitually. So strategically, when you actually benefit from the energy boost. And so this is a big shift. And this advice pisses a lot of people off because they say, oh, fuck you, I want my morning coffee. But what I say is that, do you need the energy first thing in the morning? Like, do you actually benefit from the productivity boost that could give you? Because your productivity will go up if you're doing focused work and not work that requires creativity, because again, it makes your mind more inhibited. But use it strategically when you'll actually benefit from it.
Cool. And what about working out, things like that? I will just kind of add in like one thing for me, which I've actually got a lot of people on the podcast to do is, and you can ask your friend about this too, about doing like cold plunges, like ice baths, things like that. For me, like I've just found that to be the best way to start your day.
This is an area where we differ.
Caffeine later in the
Because
day.
there's
But
nothing less I want to do first thing in the morning than like, but good for you, man.
Oh man, no, yeah, trust me. It's kind of like the analogy I can best give is because you think that it's going to get easier over time, and I feel like if anything, it's like touching a hot stove
This
plate.
is really
Like,
motivating. To
every time like I go near the water, you almost feel like crying because you're just like, no, like, well, I'm just saying that you never get used to it at all. It's like, no, like I'm going to do damage to myself. But afterwards, like the short story is I was on Transformers, and like I remember vividly like one day where I'm like completely sleep deprived. Like I literally was carrying my head to work. I was in San Francisco and I was just like so tired. And the next day is when I first started doing ice baths, and like I wanted to punch people on the street. Like I just wanted to run everywhere and just like go clock someone in the face because I'm just like, I have so much energy. But at the same time, like for me, caffeine is just like, I enjoy drinking coffee. It doesn't really do much for me, but yeah, so but for me, like that was like one of those things that just kind of boosted my energy.
And exercise is the same way.
It makes you feel really good.
It increases blood flow to your brain. It allows you to focus for longer. It gives you more energy. And it prevents you from falling into one of those energy spirals too, where if you need energy, you drink caffeine and then you have less energy, so you drink more caffeine, and then you kind of hypercaffeinate without working out, without getting enough sleep. So the caffeine affects your sleep and you get less sleep. So it allows you to kind of, we're wired, evolutionarily speaking, to walk 5 to 9 miles every single day. And if you look at the activity that most of us get each day, it doesn't really live up to that history. And so if you look at when you have the most energy and when you're able to bring the most of yourself to what you're doing, chances are you're going through a period where you're working out. And so I think most of us have so much data at our disposal in when we have the most energy, when we have the most focus. We just need to look for that data and realize that, okay, maybe I'm getting enough sleep then. Maybe I'm not working these insane hours. Maybe I'm taking more breaks in order to think a little bit, a thinking break throughout the day. Maybe I'm exercising, getting enough sleep. Maybe I'm having a coffee before working on something, or first thing in the morning, just one coffee. And so I think we have a lot of data there too. We just don't look at it. We look for productivity advice in books and in conversations like this, but we also have to look backwards because we have enough data there for when we're the most motivated, when we're the most productive, when we're the most creative. And chances are a lot of those things were true.
That's awesome. It's really cool. And in terms of Hyperfocus, it comes out Tuesday, right? The 28th of August. That's really cool. I'll definitely link to it in the show notes as well. But for people who want to go and find out more about you and start to kind of dig into isolation.
Oh man, you can stalk me many places.
Where would be the best
Ottawa.
places for people to go?
I already gave my phone number earlier in the show, so you can. I don't know. You probably can't triangulate that, but maybe if you work for Rogers in Canada, you can get it. But yeah.
Oh man.
Oh my
good
god.
Old Rogers, like. Sorry, I'm just gonna say, like, I cocked up a few like $3,000 roaming bills with them.
Yeah,
once,
any telco.
Total.
I'm a big fan of telcos, airlines.
And Bell.
I'm a big fan of any industry where all the companies race to the bottom. Air Canada's all right. Yeah, they.
That's right.
Out of the
Air
airlines,
Canada,
they're all.
anyway.
British Air, I think, has the best service, best food on British Air too. Oh yeah.
Go Qantas. At least Qantas a few years back. I think it's kind of changed a bit now, but yeah, Qantas was always like a good one. Now I call them quant ass because they've definitely changed their quality.
TAP Portugal. I
Who else we
forget
want
what
to slander?
TAP
We got
stands
like a
for,
minute
but
or
it's
two
like
more.
the
Who else we
Portuguese
wanna-
airline. I remember when I took the flight. This is hilarious. I flew back. I had a
Okay.
talk there, and I flew back on there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to upgrade to business class because like the talk went well. I wanted to treat myself. It would have been $8,000 to fly business class between Lisbon and I think Toronto. So I said, fuck that. But so I went economy class, uh, and at the back of the seat behind me, they had, remember those like little S video adapters? They had like a hookup so you can like send some video to the screen through this S video adapter, and like a bunch of old gears and knobs on the back. It was a really fascinating experience and very cramped also. But yeah, anyway, my work, you can find it any bookstore. My first book was called The Productivity Project. This book is called, which I'm excited about, where I look at the research into how we manage our attention and how we can focus more deeply on what's actually important each day, actually like the right way, and not just the way that sounds good but doesn't work. It's called Hyperfocus, How to Be More Productive in a World of Distraction. It's at any bookstore, any Amazon store, any ebook store, any audiobook store. If you like the sound of my voice, you can have me read the book to you in my nice dulcet soporific tones. If you don't like my voice, you can get the book on Amazon. And my site is called The Life of Productivity. It's where I write a semi-weekly column about productivity and how we can invest in stuff that actually works.
That's awesome, and you definitely check out your website. You specifically, everyone else, because I've been going through it, just like looking at a lot of the articles, and like I said, originally I wanted to read your book, and that was the thing. I was like, well, crap, now I got it so late. I'll try to get the audiobook, and I realized it wasn't out yet because I figured I can plow through that. But you've got a lot of really great content on there. So yeah, I think that's a really good wealth of knowledge, and I'll definitely be pushing your book because you're right. Like I think it's hitting on all the right things instead of it being the productivity porn that a lot of people love to reorganize. Like, oh, which app should I use for my calendar?
Exactly.
It's going to make me 100x more productive instead of actually just doing it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
That's so cool, man. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to chat. This has been really awesome. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was a lot of fun chatting with Chris and getting a lot of the insights that he's shared. I want to thank Chris for taking the time out to chat. His book is available right now called Hyperfocus. I'll leave a link in the show notes where you can buy the book on Amazon or the audiobook from Audible. And in addition to that, I strongly recommend that you check out his blog. And again, I'll leave links in the show notes to all of this stuff, so that way you don't have too much brain fatigue jumping through all these links. That being said, next episode I'll be back with one final episode to do with building relationships and building your outreach system. There's a lot of really cool stuff that we get into, and it's kind of the final piece of the puzzle with all of the information that I've been sharing lately around your demo reel and landing jobs. There's a lot of really cool episodes coming up. In the meantime, go to allanmckay.com/157 for the show notes, which will link to everything that we discussed in this episode, as well as other resources, as well as key insights that we share from this chat, and also quotes and other great stuff. Okay, so that being said, I'll be back next episode. Until then, rock on.